cuts off the hands of the man who's been holding his hair.
No!
Well,
we're back. We're back again. Let's get in it. Vikings Epic History TV. The Vikings and their descendants speak for themselves. Their voices express a spirit which is like no other.
AD
All right.
793. Raiders appear without warning off England's east coast. They land at Lindisfarne, known as Holy Island.
It's very interesting that he says AD instead of saying like 700 AD. That's very uncanny. Epic History TV.
Where they slaughter monks, steal treasure and holy relics, then vanish back across the Dark Sea.
They're like the
It
sea
was
people.
Western Europe's first traumatic encounter with the Vikings. For 3 centuries, these pagan pirates from Scandinavia terrorized Europe, raiding, extorting, enslaving, and ultimately conquering.
What does pagan mean? Pagan means like people who worship like different gods, right? Is pagan and Christianity like similar, or are they different? I've heard people arguing about this like all the time. Like, can someone please explain that to me? Like, what is the difference between pagan and Christianity? Because I've heard people say that Christianity took some things from pagan. I've heard of Norse mythology, and it sounds very similar to Christianity in a way.
They roamed deep into Russia and the Mediterranean, even daring to attack what they called Miklagard, the great city Constantinople. Viking longships and a mastery of seamanship and navigation gave them the ability to strike at will, with the element of surprise. But their enemies, including Anglo-Saxons and Franks, themselves belonged to proud warrior cultures. Was there something more that gave the Vikings their lethal edge? Professor Tom Shippey is an expert in...
Like, Vikings were basically, like, the name Viking literally means pirate. They're literally just pirates, right? Like, I do wonder what made them leave, so I guess we'll find out.
Viking history and medieval literature. He believes their success can be attributed in part to a unique mindset. A mindset revealed in the Vikings' own sagas.
Oh, really?
There are a great many sagas written in the Vikings' own language, which is Old Norse.
What is this?
There's the famous sagas of Icelanders, but there's also Konungasögur, that's sagas of kings. There's Fornaldasögur, sagas of old times. These are looked on with suspicion these days because they were written
freaking sagas. What is this freaking anime?
hundreds of years later, mostly in far-off Iceland. And people say, oh, well, you can't rely on those for history. They're fiction. Well, actually, a lot of it is fiction, and some of it's fairy tale, and you can pick that out quite easily. But a lot of it isn't fiction.
Yeah,
I think it's based on family memories.
Yeah,
and people
definitely.
who can't read and write often have good memories, and they take memories seriously, and they pass them on. Leaving the fact and fiction question aside, they do all express...
I view it the same way like how the Bible is. The Bible is very exaggerated, but I do believe that the events in the Bible were true, but they were just simply exaggerated. Like what my mother said, the Bible is written in parables, right? So a lot of people like to say that the Bible is like made up, but basically like what he said, you gotta like read it for yourself and like just use critical thinking, man. You know what I mean? Like,
I think, a very characteristic and consistent attitude, which I call the Viking mindset. And that's really quite distinctive. Two of the distinctive things about it are the fascination with scenes of death, with famous death songs, with famous last stands, all that kind of thing. And the other is the very characteristic sense of humor, which I call, I'm afraid, it's not good sense of humor, it's bad sense of humor. It's the kind of humor which is really rather cruel or grim. And we see quite a lot of it.
we'll look at 5 famous death scenes from the old Norse sagas to see what they can tell us about the Viking mindset. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream.
Like, I'm broke. I say this in all of my reactions. I am broke. I am broke. I am broke. I have no donation set up. I am broke.
His own saga says he was the son of a Swedish king.
Oh, bloody hell. Did I skip too far?
Many tales are told of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. His own saga says he was the son of a Swedish king and slew a dragon.
Similar to that.
But that when he sailed to England seeking further fame and riches, he was shipwrecked off the coast of Northumbria. He was taken prisoner by its Christian king, Ella, who decided to inflict a terrible death on the famous Viking. He had him thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. As he faced death, Ragnar called out to the king.
The famous line from the death of Ragnar is "Gnithia mundu grisir ef galtar hag vissi." The piggies would grunt if they knew how the old boar died. The word Gnithia, it means grunt, but it also kind of sounds like grunt. And I think you could actually translate it, go oink oink. The piggies would go oink oink if they knew how the old boar died. It's a joke. And the joke is actually on King Ella, because there's this barnyard vocabulary, piggies and oink.
This is interesting as heck.
My sons are going to come, and what they do to you won't bear thinking about. It's a threat. The funny thing is, although it's a late saga, this...
That is awesome. That is awesome. That is awesome. I have to learn more about Viking history. I don't know much about Viking history. I've been learning about Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Belisarius, man. Bro, freaking hell, dude. If you got anything that I can react to on freaking Viking history, bro, please recommend it to me. This seems extremely interesting. Let's continue.
Story about the piggies was known earlier, because it was actually quoted by a Latin chronicler. He'd heard about the piggies. He got the phrase right. He just didn't understand what it meant. He thought Ragnar was saying, if my sons knew about this, they'd come and rescue me. But he didn't. He wasn't hoping to rescue. He knew he hadn't got any hope. He was saying, my sons, when they hear about this, then they'll avenge me. And of course they did.
Oh, okay.
Ragnar's death in a snake pit is almost certainly invented. But his sons, the piggies, were very real. In 865, the Ragnarsons landed in England.
Wait. So he didn't die in a snake pit? How did he die? How did he die then? Very interesting. All right.
With a great army, rampaging across East Anglia and Northumbria and killing King Ella. Is there any link between these historical events and the saga tale of Ragnar's death?
Very intriguing.
Very early on identified as the Ragnarsons. And my suggestion would be...
Look, I know I'm not speaking a lot. Usually my reactions, I have a lot to say, but I said this before my reaction that if I'm not really like saying much, it's because I'm like paying attention, right? This is like very like mind-boggling to me, right? So I'm like taking in all the details, you know what I mean? So like bear with me if I'm not speaking. I'm actually enjoying this right now.
That the whole story of Ragnar's death in the snake pit was made up later on in order to motivate the invasion of England. Why did the Ragnarsons invade England? They did it to take vengeance for their father. And so you make up a story about the death of the father and the way that the vengeance was motivated.
Oh, okay. But how did he actually like die though? I want to know that. How did he actually die?
According to legend, Rolf Kraki was a great Danish king of the 6th century, a Danish King Arthur. His great hall stood near Lera, where he entertained a famous band of champions. But many sought his throne. His own cousin, Hjörvarthur, made a surprise dawn attack on the king's hall. After a desperate last stand, Rolf lay dead, surrounded by his champions. Only one man survived. Vugr, the weakest man in Hrolf's court. He'd been the butt of all jokes, even when he'd sworn to avenge Hrolf's death. Now he was hauled before the new king, Hjörvathr.
Hrolf is dead, and all his champions are dead.
That is ironic as heck. The weakest man is the only man alive? Like, what?
Dead as well. That's the right thing to do, except Vugr, who is dragged out of a pile of bodies. And for some reason, Hjörvathr thinks it would be a good idea to get a pledge of allegiance from Hrolf's last surviving champion. So they get Vugr, and he is hauled up, asked to swear allegiance to Hjörvathr, and Hjörvathr gives him his sword to swear allegiance on. Bad idea. Vugr picks it up, runs Hjörvathr through. That's the end of Hjörvathr and the Skjoldung dynasty.
Oh, how did I not see that coming? Oh, nah, that is mad. Freaking hell, man. Freaking, I'm like processing everything. Usually in my reactions, I'm able to like predict whenever this type of stuff happen, but damn.
And of course, Vugr is immediately killed. But he has fulfilled his vow. So it's another example, really, of the Viking love of, shall we say, wit, of being able to turn the tables in a funny kind of way. Once again, Ragnar's joke was on King Ella, and Vugr's joke is on King Hjörvathr. Very funny. I
wonder how it feels when someone like stabs you. The fact that people were able to pick up swords back then and willfully like risk themselves getting stabbed. Bloody hell, man. Does that instantly kill you? I don't think that instantly kills you, man. There's no way in hell. I think usually like you get stabbed and then like you sit there and then you wait until you die. Right?
Sort of way.
This game, you're not ready for it.
Hit this part.
Legends about King Hrolf come from a tumultuous period of Europe's history, traditionally known as the Dark Ages. But recent discoveries suggest the tales of King Hrolf have a basis in fact.
King Hrolf is the Danish King Arthur. They lived at about the same time in the early 6th century. For a long time, the story of King Hrolf was regarded rather like the story of King Arthur, it couldn't be true. But then the archaeologists, alerted by a chance discovery, started looking at the traditional site of King Hrolf's court, which is now the small village of Lejre in Denmark. And much to their surprise, they discovered the site of one enormous hall after another. I think they have now found 6 of them, all through the Vikings and pre.
These are all burial sites. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's actually so freaking cool. That is so cool. Dude, it's crazy to me how much of history is just erased. Like, I was talking about that with my older brother one day, oldest brother actually. I was telling him like how like the cities in the Bibles, I do believe that the Bibles are a historical document that people should use, but take it with a grain of salt. But like historical cities, I should say, in the Bible, a lot of them are just like erased, like a lot of them are just completely disappeared. Like there's hardly like any essence of them left over, right? So, dude, it's really crazy, like how much history around us is just like there's a lot of history around us, but we don't know because a lot of it is just buried. A lot of it is just freaking. I don't even know the word, like covered up, I should say. Let's continue.
Viking era. So that part of the story, at least, was true. Later, once upon a time, Hlethraborg really was a major power centre in the early Viking period.
The Jomsvikings were a legendary group of Viking mercenaries, picked men bound by a code of honor. According to Old Norse sagas, they had a fortified base on the Baltic coast at Jomsborg. In 986, they were recruited by the King of Denmark to subjugate Jarl Håkon of Lauder. But at Hjörungavágr, they suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Jarl Håkon and his son Jarl Eirik. Vikings rarely offered or expected mercy. After the battle, the Jomsviking prisoners were lined.
I would expect that. They wouldn't expect mercy. Look at the stuff that they did, bro. Like, this is what I was saying earlier, man. Like, how in the world do people just decide to get up and freaking risk getting freaking stabbed? You know, like, it's easy to go and freaking stab someone. But freaking, like, oh, hell no. Nah. Like, one paper cut alone is just
up for execution.
Crazy, man.
The beheading started, and the Jomsvikings, who had a code of their own, which forbade them to express fear at any point. One of them, for instance, said he would not kneel down to be beheaded. He insisted on standing up and being beheaded from the front, so that people could see that he did not flinch from the blow. One guy does kneel down to be beheaded, and he says, I'm a bit worried about my hair. I don't want to get blood on it. Could somebody very kindly take my hair and pull it over my head, and then the beheading can go on? But as the axe falls, he jerks his head back.
What? Nah, bro. Nah, that's cope. That's cope. That is cope. That's cope. This is literally cope.
Axe cuts off the hands of the man who's been holding his hair.
No!
Well, that's bad sense of humor.
No!
What a joke. Everybody laughs like nobody's business. In particular, actually, Jarl Eirik, who thinks he's never seen anything so funny in all his life. It was such a good joke. He says, well, we'll let you off. And the Jomsviking very properly says,
I would talk when the video is playing, but I want to hear what this guy has to say. Dude, talk about we do a little bit of trolling, man. That's literally what this is, man. We do a bit of trolling type stuff, man. Oh, that's hilarious. Freaking hell.
Can't accept that unless you let all the others off too. So the other Jomsvikings are then all spared. Well, you know, obviously complete fiction. No, can't believe a word of it. Yeah, about 15 miles away in that direction from where we're standing, just recently they were digging for a new road and they came upon a pile of skeletons. About 50 odd. And a separate pile of skulls. All the skeletons had been beheaded, and analysis showed they were all male, they were mostly young, and they were all Scandinavians. Okay, so...
Wow. This is what I'm talking about. So much history around us that we don't know about. So much, dude. Holy crap, man. Damn, let's see what he says. I think this is probably one of the most fascinating videos I watch from Epic History TV, man.
There was a mass beheading, just as described in the saga, and furthermore, several of the men had been beheaded from the front, just as in the saga.
Yeah.
So, once again, what appeared to be complete fiction turns out to have some corroboration in
like I said,
fact.
It's just like the Bible, man.
This is why I stopped shopping on Amazon.
Skip this part.
You should too. Don't spend another dime on Amazon.
Olaf Haraldsson, King of Norway, the man who'd one day become its patron saint, had been a feared Viking before he became a Christian king. In 1029, the Danes, supported by local jarls, drove Olaf into exile. When he and his followers returned the next year to reclaim the throne, they were met by a huge army of hostile pagan farmers. Retreat was not an option for Olaf. On the morning of battle, the restless king rose early and asked his poet, Thormod, to sing to him, to pass the hours before the army gathered.
Yo, I get that so hard. I get that so hard. You know when you're just like bored as hell? You know, like you're just so freaking bored, man. And you just need time to go by. Oh my god. I think this is so relatable. Probably the most relatable thing that I've freaking like seen in history.
Thormod immediately starts to sing the Bjarkamal, which is actually a poem supposed to be sung by Böðvar Bjarki on the morning of the last stand of King Hrolf, which we've discussed
I
already.
love this guy's accent. I love listening to this guy's accent.
Dagar is opkomen, dunja hana fjadrar, maules vil mögum at vinna elfidi. Vaki eok vaki, vinna hövuð, alir inni utstu, adils of sinar. Haar in hathkleipi, Hrolfur skutandi, item góðir men, there is ekki flygja.
My man is over here speaking another language like it's nothing. Okay, I see you. Bilingual. Okay.
The day has come up. The roosters clap their wings. Time for the wretched serfs to do the heavy labor. Wake now, wake, company of friends.
Insult to the serfs,
all
okay.
you best ones of Athens
in Russia.
The hard grip, Hrolf the shooter. Men of good birth, they who do not flee. I do not wake you to wine, nor the whispers of women. I wake you to the hard sport of Hilda. It seems a strange choice for a poem, because it is in a way a suicide.
Did it play Scottish? I hear a bit of Celtic in his tone. Like, the way how he speaks, it sounds a little bit similar to how, Barbadians or Bajan speak. Like he sounds very similar. I think he's probably like Celtic, something like, or I don't know, like a Scot or Pict or something like that. He's definitely either Scottish or Irish. I get them confused all the time, even though I have a bit of a Scottish and Irish accent myself.
Poem. It's saying we're all going to get killed. Is this a good morale raiser? Yeah, they're Vikings. They think it's great. Everybody says, super song, just the thing. Let's get started on the battle.
Well, man.
But the odds were stacked against King Olaf and his men. Thormod's song of brave men rising to face certain death proved a premonition.
The battle is lost. King Olaf is killed, fighting in the front rank, and is brought down by a series of spear and axe blows. And as you would expect, all his chosen companions, all his bodyguard are killed around him. But Thormod the poet, survives. Not his fault, he just happens to survive. And at the end of the battle, when it's all over, he laments that he has not been allowed to join his king. And at that moment, an arrow comes flying from nowhere and hits him. And the obvious implication is the dead king sent it. He sent it so as to give Thormod his wish that he could join Olaf. And Thormod then composes a poem about his own wound and dies without quite finishing it. He dies on his feet, still reciting the poem, but he doesn't complete the last line, which fortunately is completed for him by a bystander.
Wow.
And the bystander is the teenage Harald Hardrada.
What? Yo. I'm getting goosebumps right now. I'm getting goosebumps, man. I'm getting goosebumps. This is, freaking hell. Freaking hell. Harald Hardrada was here? Wow.
Join large-scale battles with military vehicles. The online action game War Thunder has received a major up.
That game is trash. Harold Hardrada's last stand. All right, now
Harold
we're getting
Hardrada grew to
Harold.
become king of Norway and
Yeah.
one of the greatest Vikings of all.
Yeah,
His
Even
adventures
I know
led
who
him
he is.
east to the city of Kiev, where he served at the court of Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise,
Ooh.
then to Constantinople.
Oh, what? Wait, Harold Hardrada? Served under him, Yaroslav the Wise? Wow, I learned something new today again, man. This is why I love reacting to this stuff.
Where he commanded the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Empire.
I've heard of these guys.
As King of Norway, Harold the Hard Ruler was brave, cruel, and acquisitive, and in 1066 set his sights on the English throne. But King Harold Godwinson marched north to meet him, moving so rapidly he caught the Vikings off guard at Stamford Bridge.
The thing about the Battle of Stamford Bridge is that Harold Hardrada and his invasion force, they were caught napping. Harold Godwinson.
Come on. I said this in one of my videos. No, I said this in my other reaction videos. The worst times to get caught lacking in history is napping and eating. You never want to get caught lacking napping and eating. Freaking hell.
Marched very quickly up to York and kept on marching through York, and the first thing the Norwegians knew about it was seeing the glint of weapons approaching. But it was a hot day, and the Norwegians had left their heavy equipment, especially their armor and their shields, down on their ships. So they were actually facing
effective?
an armored force without their armor.
Heedless of the risk, Hardrada
Was armor really effective? Like, did it really protect? I know from stuff like missiles, and when I'm saying missiles, I mean like arrows, because they called arrows like missiles back then as well. Missile doesn't mean like rocket, but it does mean rocket, but back then like missiles didn't mean arrows. But like, I know like missiles like usually penetrated fairly easily because velocity, yada yada, basic physics, yada yada. But like armor, when it comes to like swords like hitting you, like did it really like made it difficult to like penetrate? Like, because I view armor like the same way how I viewed Kevlar. Like Kevlar to me is just like, it's there, yeah, cool, protects, but meh.
advanced into battle at the head of his men.
Without the
According to
armor,
the Heimskringla sagas, written by the Icelander Snorri Sturluson, he composed poetry even now.
Framgång veri fylkingu, brunju löser und blaregjar, Hjalmar skina, efkat mina, nu ligger struth vart, at skipum nedri. Forward we go in formation, without armor against blue steel edges. Helmets shine. I don't have mine. Now our gear lies down with the ships.
this kind of
It's quite good,
bars.
actually, the poem.
Yeah, that
Harold,
poem was
who is a
good.
terrible poetic snob, thinks about it for it and says, no, that was too simple. And then he produces another poem in a much more complex and high-class meter and says that's much better.
Hardrada threw himself into the thick of the fighting, unarmored, wielding his sword with both hands. Fearless and defiant to the end, he died with an English arrow in his throat, alongside most of his army.
Oh,
He is often called the last Viking.
in his throat.
According to the saga, the Norwegians arrived in
Go on.
400 ships
Bloody
and the
hell.
survivors went home in 24.
Bloody hell!
Anglo-Saxons let
I
him go.
can't believe that.
Well,
In his throat?
that you might say
Oof.
put an end to ideas
Oh.
that England could be conquered.
I'm like feeling that in
by
my throat, man.
Norwegians or Danes or Vikings. The Viking era then was over. Harold Hardrada, you can only say, well, he died like a Viking, making jokes, making poems, lashing out with both hands until he was killed.
But can these poems really be attributed to Harold Hardrada?
I don't see there's any way that the poems could be genuine. After all, who was there to note it down or remember it.
Yeah.
Practically none of the Norwegians survived.
Yeah.
I
They all-
Snorri
they are
made them
killed,
up
man.
himself to help
Yeah.
the story out. But they're good poems. They express a kind of not regretful attitude, but it's sort of rueful. Yeah, well, we're not going to win this one. They caught us this time. Oh well, that's the way it goes. We will just have to fight it out. And that strikes me as, again, a characteristic Viking attitude.
The Battle of Stamford Bridge had unintended consequences, paving the way for another invader to become King of England.
The Battle of Stamford Bridge was, of course, a catastrophe. It was a catastrophe for the Norwegians, but it was a catastrophe for the English as well, because they took very heavy casualties as well. And 3 weeks after the Battle of Stamford Bridge, they fought the Battle of Hastings against William the Conqueror. And you can't help thinking, if
They had
they'd
no
been
time
at
to
full
rest.
strength, they'd have won.
On the 14th of October 1066, the English army suffered a crushing defeat at Hastings, and Harold Godwinson was killed. England's new king, William the Conqueror, was himself descended from a Viking adventurer.
When you have these woke revolutions, it requires all of us at some point to say, no, not going to.
The Viking Age was at an end. For nearly 3 centuries, Europe had been terrorized by Scandinavian warriors whose attitude to death gave them a dangerous edge.
What finally strikes me about the Viking mindset is not so much the defiance in the face of death, that's what you expect heroes to do. It's actually the matter-of-fact attitude, and also the liking for some kind of a joke. You can actually use vulgar words, like Ragnar in the snake pit.
This is the
You
craziest
can
one.
play dirty tricks, like Vugger with his Pledge of Allegiance. Or you can play practical jokes, like the Jomsviking getting the guy's hands cut off. Or you can nitpick about poetry, like Thormod and Harold Hardrada. All these say, death is coming, it's certain, but actually I'm going to see what I can do to make this memorable. What it makes me think is that when it comes to Vikings, you can kill them, and speaking as an Englishman, we did, over there. But frighten them?
Freaking hell. So he's English. He's English, but his accent, he has a Rotic accent. Just like us in Barbados, some of us have a Rotic accent as well. Not all of us, but some of us have a Rotic accent. But wow, okay, so he's Englishman as well. Okay.
That's not going to work. They're always going to come back at you. You're not safe until the very last one of them is dead.
Thank you.
That was such a good video. Oh, this is the most fascinating video that I have ever watched, man. Thank you for watching. Check out these videos on the screen right now. Make sure to like it for the algorithm. I think my channel is shadow banned. I'm trying to fix that. So like the video for the algorithm, please. And yeah, man, comment whatever you want to comment, and goodbye.